Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world. Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello, and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, March 6th, 2023. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. We thank our friends at Fluor for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. Perhaps the most challenging cleanup work in all of the Department of Energy complex is underway at the Hanford site in Washington State. There, crews are working to dispose of 56 million gallons of radioactive waste stored in 177 underground tanks. As with other nuclear production sites, this waste was generated during the Manhattan Project during World War II and during subsequent nuclear production in the Cold War that followed. A series of closely interrelated projects are being completed to allow 24/7 operations that will feed waste to the new Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant, or WTP, now under construction. It is a massive multi-billion-dollar undertaking that will eventually convert the liquid waste into a solid glass form for ultimate disposal. The prime contractors on site, some of the biggest names in environmental cleanup, are working together as a team to make sure the process works as planned. This teamwork even has a name. It's called One Hanford. In this episode, we'll talk with the Department of Energy's Hanford site manager, Brian Vance, about what One Hanford means and why a seamless team approach among contractors is needed.
Yeah, there's a couple of dimensions to that. One, at the most elemental level, is the workers that work across those interfaces shouldn't see somebody from a different company on the other side of the interface. They should see another Hanford employee working together to execute the direct feed low activity waste mission. So the safety culture, the operations culture, the con-ops under which they operate have to be, seamless between the contractors to operate the program in the way it's intended. There's also the potential that there will be, the reality that there may be issues, right? We might have upsets in electrical power or upsets in water, or one or more of the facilities may have to go down for planned maintenance. And the way that we have to operate in that environment really is a single integrated team, because no longer can the companies kind of operate on their own time schedules and time frames, and without the consideration of shared services, those types of things. So there's a broader aspect of it that really ties the companies together. And then as an enterprise, we have to be able to make good, sound, technical, conservative decisions quickly, and continue to operate the program. And all of those really tied to this enterprise approach, the One Hanford approach, where we all really operate at a higher level of teaming, communication, collaboration, with a safety culture, an operations culture that underpins the whole program in a way that keeps everybody tied together.
We'll hear more from Brian Vance later in the podcast, and we'll be right back with more after this from Fluor. It's one of the biggest environmental cleanup jobs in history. But what exactly is involved in cleanup of the Hanford site? Here's a report on what's going on in tank waste cleanup at Hanford.
The U.S. Department of Energy is on the verge of achieving a cleanup commitment that has been decades in the making. treating Hanford's tank waste through the Direct Feed Low Activity Waste Program. Tank waste treatment is a key component of DOE's strategic cleanup vision. Direct feed means Hanford's waste will be separated at a tank farm to remove the more radioactive portion, so the resulting low activity waste can be fed directly to the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant's low activity waste facility for immobilization in glass. The first step of transforming the waste into a form safe for storage is to move it out of the tanks and transfer it to the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant just under a mile away. Tank AP-107 is where the tank waste treatment mission begins. Waste will be fed through a special system called the Tank Side Cesium Removal System, or TSCR. TSCR is comprised of three primary structures: the control room enclosure, where operators will control the process; the ancillary system enclosure, which houses an air compressor, electrical infrastructure, and other support systems; and the process enclosure that holds 3 ion exchange columns and a filter to treat tank waste. The TSCR unit uses filters to remove solids from the tank waste and ion exchange columns to remove radioactive cesium. TSCR is designed to process up to 7,200 gallons of waste per day, or 5 gallons per minute. The filtered out cesium and solids will stay in self-shielding stainless steel columns, each weighing about 30,000 pounds. When a column is full, it will be bolted to a nearby concrete pad for storage. The pre-treated waste will be fed into another tank. This one is called Tank AP-106, and then transferred in batches to the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant. A robust double-walled pipe called a transfer line will carry the pre-treated waste about 3,000 feet from AP-106 to the low-activity waste facility for vitrification. Once the waste arrives in the low-activity waste facility, a sample is sent to the nearby analytical laboratory, where chemists at the lab characterize waste samples and determine the appropriate recipe for vitrification, mixing the radioactive waste with 13 different glass-forming materials such as silica. The tank waste's complexity and differences in each batch require individual analysis to ensure the proper recipe is used. This step ensures the final product meets state requirements for safe storage. Tank farm waste is received in a special vessel inside the low-activity waste facility. The waste is mixed with glass-forming materials and fed to one of 2 giant melters. Inside the melter, the mixture is heated to 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. As the mixture heats, 18 bubblers pump air into the liquid pool to ensure thorough mixing. Bubblers also contain temperature sensors used to monitor the temperature of the glass pool. The molten material will be poured into stainless steel containers and left to cool and solidify into a glass form. The containers will then be swabbed by a robotic arm to check for any contamination before being moved to the integrated disposal facility at Hanford. The low-activity waste facility will produce about 1,100 containers of vitrified waste each year. At the integrated disposal facility, the containers will be buried in engineered trenches called cells that will protect the groundwater and surrounding area from any contamination. Through treating low-activity waste, the DF-LAW program accelerates the removal of waste from older tanks by creating space in safer double-shell tanks. The waste, now impervious and stabilized, will be safely stored to protect human health and the environment for hundreds of years.
We'll be back with more right after this from Floor. At last year's nuclear cleanup workshop, Brian Vance, DOE's manager at the Hanford site, told attendees that DOE and its One Hanford contractors work as a team to safely deliver cleanup progress that reduces risks to the workforce, the community, and the Pacific Northwest. He said the One Hanford approach has created the communication, collaboration, and teamwork necessary to support the next phase of the cleanup mission. The Hanford workforce is preparing for 24/7 operations as an integrated team, establishing an environment that sets the course of cleanup for decades to come. I interviewed Brian Vance recently about the One Hanford team approach. Here's what he had to say. Mr. Vance, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, we're glad you're here. A lot of companies in this country spend a lot of time and effort and money trying to come up with just the right 2 or 3 word phrase that captures the essence of their mission or their competitive advantage that they have. One of obviously the most famous, I guess, is Nike with their "Just Do It." And it's not an easy task to come up with those words, but you seem to have done it with your One Hanford slogan. And that's what we wanted to talk to you about today. And let's start with this. Where did this concept originate? Where did One Hanford come from? And why did you feel it was needed?
Well, I took the role as the manager of the Office of River Protection in late 2017. And, as we looked at where the project was, the waste treatment plant project in the construction phase, it was getting close to the end. And we started to think more about the next phase of the mission, which is actually the operation of the plant, but also in recognition that the waste treatment plant itself is only one part of the process and really a program that is represented by direct feed low activity waste. Because when you look at the framework of the machine, it's really a site-wide machine. The tank farms provide the source, the pre-treated waste to the waste treatment plant. The tank farms were operated by one of our contractors, Washington River Protection Solutions. They were delivering the treated waste to the waste treatment plant, constructed and at least operated through commissioning and into hot commissioning by Bechtel. Then the byproducts, the glass canisters, would go to the integrated disposal facility managed by a third contractor, the Central Plateau contractor. And the byproducts of the vitrification process, the condensed, the steam and the processes that would come from that, go back to the Washington River Protection Solutions contractor in a different facility on the site. And so the process really required both offices, both the UE offices, both the Office of River Protection and the Richland Operations Office, and all of our contractors, because the other aspect of this is all the infrastructure, water, power, sewer, IT, all came from another contractor on the site under the Richland Operations side. So we recognized that we had to look at the site and look at the process in a fundamentally different way. And there were a couple transitions tied to that. One was simply the transition of working across those interfaces as a team, which we really hadn't been needed to do for a long time because we were largely a 4-day-a-week, 10-hour-a-day type of a site with construction and demolition or soil remediation projects going on. And then the second part was the pace of the site was going to have to increase as well, because once we recognize you have 2 melters up and hot and running, they're up and running forever until we have to shut one down to replace them. And so the pace of the site more towards a 24/7, 365 operation was another transition. And when we thought about how we would do that, we had to start talking about the site and the team in a different way. And One Hanford just seemed like a natural way to tie it all together.
Well, why is this approach important to your ultimate goal of vitrifying waste? You talked about all the contractors that you have on the site, and so why is it important for these contractors to be integrated in that way to as a team to accomplish this vitrification mission?
Yeah, there's a couple of dimensions to that. One, at the most elemental level, is the workers that work across those interfaces shouldn't see somebody from a different company on the other side of the interface. They should see another Hanford employee working together to execute the direct feed low activity waste mission. So the safety culture, the operations culture, the ConOps under which they operate have to be, seamless between the contractors to operate the program in the way it's intended. there's also the potential that there will be, well, the reality that there may be issues, right? We might have upsets in electrical power or upsets in water, or one or more of the facilities may have to go down for planned maintenance. And the way that we have to operate in that environment really is a single integrated team, because no longer can the companies kind of operate on their own time schedules and time frames, and without the consideration of shared services, those types of things. So there's a broader aspect of it that really ties the companies together. And then as an enterprise, we have to be able to make good, sound, technical, conservative decisions quickly, and continue to operate the program. And all of those really tied to this enterprise approach, the One Hanford approach, where we all really operate at a higher level of teaming, communication, collaboration, with a safety culture, an operations culture that underpins the whole program in a way that keeps everybody tied together.
Well, from a management standpoint, what do you and your managers do to encourage this teamwork and this One Hanford approach?
Well, that's it started really as a concept in 2018, and then I became the manager of the Richland Operations Office, while I was also the manager of the Office of River Protection, in February of 2019. So at that point, we really started to go beyond just direct feed low activity waste program and the One Hanford approach, to see it more as a site-wide approach. And it really just started with the communications between the two sets of managers in the two offices, because as the site owner and the customer to our contractors, the Department of Energy, we can create these types of changes more efficiently and more effectively than anybody else can, simply because of the role in the site. And so we started effectively routine meetings with the leadership teams with, I still had 2 deputy managers, 1 on each side. I had several assistant managers all at the senior executive service level on both sides. But routinely, we didn't talk to each other up to the point where there was, I was in the single manager role. So then we went to daily, weekly operations meetings, team meetings, started to talk as a team, and that started the process. But we also looked even more broadly at how there was 2 cultures that had evolved on the site between the Office of River Protection, which was really a projects-based culture, because the Office of River Protection was established in NDAA 1999 as a project office, which was focused on the delivery of the tank waste mission. So it was a micro set of the team at the larger site at Richland Operations. And so the cultures evolved over time, from a project culture and a site culture, to the point where we had over 700 procedures that were half RL procedures, half ORP procedures. And so we went through a procedure rationalization, best of breed, to bring it together, because we had functional overlaps between the 2 offices as well. So we tried to start working our way through all of those overlaps. Even though the offices still remained separate, we had to operate as a single integrated team, all 300 federal employees here, in a way that was different than in the past, that represented that One Hanford approach, to be able to be in a position to drive the contractors down that trail as well. And so then on the contractor front, we did a couple things. The first thing we did was we had a Reimagine the Site event in the spring of 2019, where we talked about, we reimagined the site with an operating waste treatment plant and operating DFLAW program. And that was just to get everybody together to talk about how things would change. You think about things like an electrical upset, where in the past you might be able to go the weekend and get it back up on Monday morning and get people back to work. Now we have to recover it within 3 to 5 to 6 hours to make sure that the melters don't stay hot and the molten pools of glass stay molten, and we continue operating. And so everybody had to think about the way that they would operate in that new environment in a different way. And that was just to kind of start the discussion. We also established a direct feed low activity waste program manager. I selected Tom Fletcher, who's also the waste treatment plant assistant manager, because he was sort of at the center of the storm, as a means of getting those interfaces connected, right? Getting all the contractors talking more directly about those interfaces and working everybody in the same direction from a team perspective. And then I asked the contractor that's really our integrator to develop a new governance model, a model under which we as a Hanford team could work together more efficiently to make good, sound, not only business decisions, but operations decisions across the site in this new operating regime that we were working towards. So we issued the governance model in January of 2020, and then the pandemic came into play in March of 2020. And so, it was a little bit of serendipity, but the fact is the governance model became a key aspect of our ability as a Hanford site team to manage through the pandemic with in a fundamentally new and different way, and really matured in a lot of ways that enterprise approach, because we wanted to make sure that we were very consistent between the department and our contractors and how we were managing the pandemic, so that the individual employees of the individual contractors did not see differences across the site, because it was a time of emotion and concern and, with a new threat. And so being able to operate in that way really was a galvanizing force to the maturity and the maturation, frankly, of our enterprise model, our One Hanford approach, which was really very effective in bringing us all together. And we actually issued an update to the governance model a year after we'd started, based on all the lessons we had learned during the pandemic, because we had learned some things about the process using the pandemic that we had to enhance. And frankly, the timing was really good, because it really is helping us now to be more ready as a site team as we get closer and closer to waste treatment plant operations.
Do you feel like you have a complete buy-in from all your contractors into the One Hanford approach?
At the leadership level, absolutely. We meet with our leadership team, the department, and our contractors at least weekly for an ops meeting, and then in other venues. And then I also meet with the contractor presidents more in a smaller group format, a couple usually monthly, but also on ad hoc issues as well. But in reality, I think at the leadership level, we really do. I think the transition that we're really striving to achieve is deeper into the organizations, because we have folks here, we transitioned to from a national security mission to an environmental cleanup mission in 1989. And so there was a fundamental shift in the site that we've been through many years ago, more than 30 years ago. But the site operations posture over at least the last 20 years was at a much different pace. And really the contractors didn't have to work together as closely. And so there's people that have worked here a long time where their cultural orientation in the workplace is not the same, and their habits in the workplace are not the same, as they will need to evolve as we go forward. So we're really working as a leadership team to get those working level relationships and the philosophy of the site driven a little bit deeper into the organization, into second and third and fourth tier managers, and all the way down to the foundations of the organization, because that's going to be important to our success. And we're doing that in a time when we're seeing a little bit higher attrition across the workforce, ranging around 20%, where historically we'd seen 7 to 10% attrition on a yearly basis. Part of that's really driven by the maturing workforce, but there's others that people just choose to go work in other places at times as well. And so, there's an opportunity in that change, because we have a lot of people coming to the site that don't have any preconceived notions, but they're also probably coming to the site without having to work in an environment where there's an operational pace that's similar to what we have here, unless they've worked in other refineries or commercial nuclear power plants, places like that. So we are really working hard to drive this farther down into the organization. But I would tell you, at the leadership level, there is very good alignment, because we all experienced the pandemic together. We all really had it was a constructive and positive experience from a working relationship perspective. We just have to get farther into the organization as we get closer and closer to waste treatment plant operations.
When I think about Hanford, a couple of things come to mind. One is you have a massive undertaking there in terms of cleanup. Some of the most hazardous challenges that anybody faces in the entire DOE complex. And I-Quiet has indicated that there's probably 6 decades of work left out there. So it's a very long-term job. And soon you're going to be going to 24/7 operations kind of around the clock. The other thing is it seems like all of your processes to get to vitrification are so interdependent on each other that there has to be this seamless operation to make sure that things happen when they're supposed to happen. So the feed material, the waste feed gets where it's supposed to go, and everything keeps running. I wonder what would be your concern if there wasn't a One Hanford approach. What would the result be of any other kind of approach besides that team and seamless approach that you're trying to take under One Hanford?
Yeah, it would really be very difficult to progress the mission that we're preparing to transition into as safely and efficiently as effectively as we need to without the One Hanford approach. We've got we remain a 2 DOE office site. I have 6 prime contractors, in some cases under different contract types. And we've got to find ways to make sure that as a team, we are creating the conditions where we're all pulling the same direction, which is, obviously not always simple in the structure that we have, that the site was kind of created on and has evolved into. I think we've got to continue to work to reinforce the partnerships, the relationship between the department and our contractors, between our contractors and each other in many ways, to break down those traditional barriers and make sure that we're all, from an enterprise and a One Hanford perspective, all aligned and pulling the same direction, all with the same sense of deliberate urgency, but all really committed to those foundational things like the health and safety of the workforce as our top priority, the seamlessness of our communications and the trust and collaboration we have to be able to maintain to have those hard discussions about difficult issues at 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes, to be able to get to a solution in an efficient way to continue to execute the mission. And as we look at the site, even more broadly than just the direct feed low activity waste mission, understanding that we're managing an overall risk profile at the site level. And so our underlying charter or philosophy for how we have to operate the site is focused on optimizing and maximizing risk reduction for every dollar invested by Congress in the cleanup mission at the Hanford site. And so when you think about that broad risk portfolio, you have to think about things like infrastructure. There'll be situations where I have to invest in roads, I may have to invest in water and power, I may have to invest in sewer to manage the risk, to establish the infrastructure so that the cleanup effort that's going on within direct feed low activity waste program is supported, as you said, over 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and continuing to optimize and right size our infrastructure as a part of the overall risk portfolio. Because if we allow the infrastructure not to support our needs, then we're going to actually impact the mission performance, and we just can't afford that. So all of us stepping back and really looking at the site holistically and comprehensively, and challenging ourselves, challenging each other to identify those areas that maybe not thought of as traditional risks from an environmental cleanup perspective, but mission risks that would impact our ability to execute the mission as efficiently and effectively as we need to.
Are you aware, to your knowledge, has this kind of a unified approach at this level been tried at any other DOE sites where cleanup is going on?
Most of the other sites aren't like Hanford in lots of ways. The other sites often have 2 DOE organizations there, but they're probably different elements of the department, like nuclear energy or NNSA or the Office of Science, and some with Office of Environmental Management activities on those locations. Hanford's unique. We're an Office of Environmental Management only site. And so we're unique because we had 2 EM organizations on the same site, and again, there were reasons to do that when the NDA 1999 was issued, to really get a project focus on the waste treatment plant and delivering the tank waste mission. But I don't know that there's another site that requires the same level of coordination, because they're different missions on the same location, but it's the same mission on the same location. So I know the other sites have processes that enable cooperative agreements and cooperative working relationships, because we're all within the DOE family. But I think Hanford's unique in the fact that we had two EM offices on an EM site, and this is the natural progression of how we need to evolve to be successful in our mission going forward. I don't think the other sites have the similar challenges or maybe the similar opportunities as well.
Let's talk about your cleanup priorities for 2023. Information I've looked at lately shows that you've retrieved 21 single shell tanks and just completed retrieval of the second of your 18 tank farms with completion of the AX farm. What are you looking to happen in 2023, and what will make your year a success?
Well, there's really two parts to that answer, because part of it is the actual cleanup objectives, milestones we want to accomplish on the site, which for me, as I think about, we want to be well along the path of commissioning the waste treatment plant. We want to have 2 melters hot by the end of the year, and really going through when I say cold commissioning, that's the non-radioactive commissioning, and that will go through a series of simulant runs, and then we'll introduce chemical hazards as a part of the cold commissioning process. So we want to be moving that part of the mission along. We want to have the tank side cesium removal system continue to operate. We should have another batch process started here in March, and we're working to accelerate that schedule into February. We've already treated 380,000 gallons of tank waste, and it's ready to be transported or sent over to the waste treatment plant when the waste treatment plant is ready to start hot commissioning. We're really striving to get between 800,000 and 1 million gallons of pre-treated waste prepared in advance of the waste treatment plant being ready. So we have 3 more batches we've projected of tank side cesium removal system operations batches to get to that point. What we don't always talk about a lot is there are major upgrades being conducted at the effluent treatment facility, which is one of the facilities that we use to manage the byproducts of the vitrification process. We've established a 4th basin in our liquid effluent retention facility, which will also support those byproducts. We've got some construction work remaining, or really cleanup work remaining at the integrated disposal facility. And we've got all the permitting to complete, which we're on track to complete all the permitting. All of those activities have to be completed by the end of this year, really, to be in a position when the waste treatment plant's ready to move forward, for those facilities to move forward. And so there's a lot of activities going on there. We also have infrastructure projects that we're building a new water plant on the site to replace the 1943 water plant that's operated from the beginning of the Manhattan Project. Working with Bonneville Power Administration to do some refurbishment work on our electrical grid to support enhanced reliability for the waste treatment plant when operations occur there. And those are all really centered around the work to support direct feed low activity waste program. But we also have those big risk reduction projects we're continuing to execute. You talked about, we're actually retrieving the last of the 4 AX farm tanks right now. We've actually started the retrieval of the 4th AX farm tank, which will be the last of the AX farm tanks to be retrieved. That really just started last month, and we'll continue that process. Actually, I'm sorry, that process began this month, and we'll continue that process for another 12 to 18 months to get that tank fully retrieved. That would be the 2nd tank farm to add to C farm fully retrieved on the site. And then we have projects at 100K, which we're working now to get through the process of removing debris from one of the basins that was used for spent fuel during the national security mission. And once we get all the debris out of that basin, there's about 1 million gallons in that basin that we'll want to get out of the system, sent over to the effluent treatment facility to be treated. And that reduces one of the major risks left on the river. And then we're working on a project at the waste encapsulation and storage facility to transfer 1,936 cesium and strontium capsules. Cesium and strontium was removed from the tank farms in the 70s and maybe the early 80s timeframe because there was a lot of heat being generated in the tanks, causing the tanks to boil at times. And so we want to move those canisters from wet storage to long-term dry storage, again, to reduce another risk on the site, really a post-Fukushima assessment to get things into dry storage and more stable. And then we have one more facility in the 300 area, which was the area where the fuel was produced, and there was a lot of experimentation in the area. That's the last facility to be demolished. And so we're working through a project there to remove some heavily contaminated soil from beneath the building, ultimately to be able to enable open air demolition of the remainder of the facility at the appropriate time. So we've got some other big risk reduction projects on the horizon. And then we still have a transuranic waste mission that will start in the second half of the decade and move forward. We're going to be one of the primary shippers to the waste isolation pilot plant in the 2030s and beyond. And so the site has an incredibly diverse portfolio of products and projects that are moving along. In addition to, and I forgot to mention, our groundwater program. We're treating 2 billion gallons of groundwater per year here. And so all of those things together, seeing all of those projects move forward are setting us up for, a spectacular 2023 set of achievements. And then 2024, when we really think we're going to start that important next phase, the historical phase of the Hanford site mission, where we're going to go treat tank waste for the very first time at industrial scale. So that's one set of success criteria based on the physical aspects of our environmental cleanup. I will tell you, equally important from my perspective are things like we want 2023 to be the best year of worker safety at the Hanford site. We want to continue to move together to create the conditions across the site for the 24/7, 365 operations. In a safety culture that recognizes we can operate at that new pace just as safely as we do today under our current pace. We want to be able to enhance teamwork between the department and our contractors, and look at the governance model and see if there's other ways to enhance its performance in support of our communications, collaboration, and team activities. We want to strengthen our relationship with our regulators to ensure that we can continue to move the mission forward with the support and with the regulators all feeling the same sense of pride in accomplishing it and helping move the mission forward. And I really want to continue to broaden our engagement and awareness. We have a very broad stakeholder environment here, and we also have 3 tribal nations connected to the site. And I want to continue to strengthen our relationships, their awareness of what we're doing, their awareness of why we do it, and the focus areas that we have to clean up the site. So we get broad support from around the site as well, because from an enterprise perspective, a One Hanford perspective, and this is a $2.84 billion enterprise and team. I think really about the site on 3 dimensions. The first dimension is getting everyone aligned, and all 12,000 people that come to this site to move the mission forward every day, between the department, our primes, and our subcontractors, all living together, working together under the same culture and pulling the same direction. That's one major focus area that I have to really maintain time or spend time on to build that alignment. The second is within the lifelines of the site, within the fence line between the department and our contractors, creating the environment where world-class contractors can deliver world-class performance and the execution of the cleanup mission that they're working for us on really on the taxpayers' benefit and behalf. And then that last piece is really that broader awareness and support beyond our fence line, out into the community from local to state to regional to national to tribal, to make sure everyone recognizes and appreciates the work we're doing and can advocate for us to move the mission forward. So if we're able to continue to mature and get support and alignment across those 3 areas of focus that I have and we have as leadership team, very little we can accomplish when everyone's pulling the same direction. And seeing that come together, seeing the pride in the workforce, which I think helps us retain and also helps us recruit, are all parts of this, this broader effort that we have in play here to really redefine what a Department of Energy contractor team can accomplish together in the execution of a very complex and challenging mission. And we've made a lot of progress. And so, as I think about the future, I'm very optimistic. We've come a long way as a team. All those things are coming together. It takes constant pressure, constant investment by our entire leadership team to be able to keep everybody kind of working down that path that we see for the site and that team dynamic that is so important for our success. And so I'm very optimistic we're on a really good trajectory and hope that we can continue to keep it moving. And so it's what we can accomplish within the physical execution of the work on the site, but that cultural team part of it is just as important. And I think if we can get both of those moving down the trail this year in the same direction, the good, strong trajectory we're on, we'll have achieved the success that we're capable of for 2023 and then really be set up for a spectacular 24, 25, and 26 beyond.
Well, Mr. Vance, you have a very big job on your hands. We've covered a lot of territory here today, and I think that people should be reassured. You talk about the outreach beyond the fence line. I think people outside of the fence should be very reassured by the approach you're taking and by the One Hanford team that you're putting together and emphasizing that Hanford's in good hands, that there's a lot to do there, but you seem to be on the right track to make the kind of progress that's needed and to do the things that will make the community proud of the site and glad to be a neighbor.
No, I appreciate that very much. It's a great team and really lots of talented professionals here. So I'm lucky to be in a position like this at the right time with all the history kind of converging at a point where we can have a huge impact and really set the course for the next chapter of the Hanford cleanup.
Well, thank you for being on the podcast today.
No, it's been my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity and thanks for your support.
Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world.